Here we are today, another episode of The Intersection. Today I'm joined by a particularly special guest. His name is Nait Jones. If you know Nate, you may think he's a special guest from being a partner at Andreessen Horowitz for 8 years, or living out of his car, homeless, no degree, moving to Silicon Valley and striving his way up to launching his own successful ventures, or being in the blockchain world since 2015, where he's had business discussions with the Coinbase founders or the Dapper Labs people, or even working closely with Nas or investing in music at Royal. Many things about Nate's life that are amazing to touch on. And Nate happens to be, in my opinion, a particularly special expert on the intersection and fusion of technology and culture, which is the ethos of how I choose what guests to bring on this show. So welcome, Nate, to The Intersection.
Thanks for having me.
So to kick it off, you've mentioned the typical archetype of a technical genius using code to create software, but this overlooked cultural genius who uses different tools. Tell us more.
I don't so much know if it's tools that define what a cultural genius does, more so than building a new skeuomorphic on culture, which is how do you take the language of art, music, fashion, expression in general, or how energy is communicated between human beings, how do you tap into that and create a new shorthand? And so the most talented people of our time kind of borrow pieces of everything. They reinterpret it to what's going on in the time, and then they create a new shorthand. And they usually hack their way to distribution through whatever's available to them, usually very crude instrumentation. We can look back at the obvious example of hip-hop plugging in turntables into borrowed or stolen electricity in parks in the South Bronx, and having, midnight street parties, block parties in the park, is where the whole culture was kind of codified. But again, using crude tools, a turntable, some microphones, Technics 1200s, mixers, borrowed electricity, poor kids in the South Bronx in the 70s, figuring out a way to create a new cultural shorthand that expressed the feeling, the feeling of the times. Mm-hmm. And because it was so resonant, it caught on very quickly because the new communication medium was very efficient, because it was just more forceful. You had words over rhymes, over beats that were made from different albums being sampled, scratching, break loops, all of that kind of stuff. All of these things were crude instrumentation used to create the new cultural shorthand. That's just one very obvious example that I use all the time, and maybe it's a bit of a trite example, but very obvious.
Well, speaking of hip-hop, you were a b-boy, you got into graffiti, you were writing rhymes at 13. You did literally all of the hip-hop art forms except for DJing. Were you a DJ at any point?
It's funny. In the last couple of years, I've started DJing parties, and it's been a lot of fun. I've always wanted to do that because I know intuitively I can feel a crowd, and I know what they want to hear. I know it's a feeling. You know what needs to be played, because being on the other side of that, when the DJ does that thing and they intuitively have understood where the crowd is going now emotionally, or what the vibes are, and being able to take the crowd on that journey. So I finally got some turntables and some things last couple of years. During the pandemic, I did a show on ClubHouse. It was called The Speakeasy. It blew up. I got to 4 million followers doing that show. We did some iconic stuff on there. Just some incredible moments with some incredible guests. We had Uncle Russ on there. We had Steve Rifkin on there. We had a bunch of well-known rappers and artists on the show, actors, etc. But the one feature to the show was we played music because it was called the Speakeasy, and we wanted to kind of replace the feeling that people couldn't get because they were all locked down inside by pretending that I was a bartender and a DJ and asking people who I bring up on stage in Clubhouse what their favorite drink was and playing their favorite song. And it brought back that feeling that people really yearned for. And then when we came out of the pandemic, so to speak, I guess we're still in it, but once we came out of lockdown, I started really wanting to do that. So I started DJing. But you go back to my roots, and yes, I was doing breakdance competitions at 2 a.m. in South London as an 8-year-old. My brother sneaking me out of the house, us going on the train in South London in front of 500-600 people outdoors in a tent, huge tent.
Wow.
Like I said, in South London doing breakdance competitions, and that was that was fun when I was a kid. And then my stepdad, he had over 250,000 vinyls in the house. So, we grew up around all sorts of genres of music, and we always had a tour de force education in music every weekend, because, our house was filled with music. So I definitely came up around that when you talk about DJs, because he was a DJ, my stepdad was.
Interesting. That picture of you playing breakdancing in front of hundreds of people is so interesting. Growing up in Chicago, being 22 years old in the underground hip hop scene, I've seen everything except for large breakdance competitions. I'm sure they were around, but it wasn't as common. Do you feel like your roots in hip hop and in building culture from the ground up directly kind of reflected your work as an adult, merging culture with technology?
By far, the biggest influence in my life is hip hop music and hip hop culture. By far, it really gave me the, rap artists giving me the framework, of which to build from, whether that be Rick Ross or Jay-Z from a capitalist standpoint, whether that be artists like Common from a spiritual standpoint, or whether that be artists like Nas from a community and wisdom standpoint, and just from the psychology of life, or Wu-Tang on brotherhood. I mean, there's, you can just go down the line. But just coming up in that culture, being so affected by what I saw, which was aspirational coming up in Europe, all I wanted to do was absorb hip-hop culture, and I wanted to, I just looked up to American culture when I was a kid. Once I got to America, that was it. It was a wrap for me. 12, 13 years old, that was it. But I landed in the Midwest in Kansas City, well, at least 50, 60 miles outside of Kansas City. So it was a bit of a culture shock at first. It wasn't what I expected.
So you were in London, and then you came to the Midwest. But at one point, your dad being in the military, you lived in Germany. And instead of staying on the American bases, you guys lived in he took you to the countryside to assimilate you into the culture, and you said it did so much for you. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So, I've kind of talked about this before. Actually, I talked about this with friends, which is there's this part of cultural education that I think more and more young people are missing out on, which is being placed into very difficult positions socially and having to learn the adaptation practices to be able to maneuver in those environments. When like you mentioned, when I was 11, it's weird because you spend your whole life kind of being an outsider in so many ways that it becomes sort of a comfort being an outsider. So, I'm 11 years old. We get stationed from England. We get stationed in Germany. And instead of getting base housing, they got a stipend because base housing was full. So my parents at the time, they got a stipend to live off base. And so we lived out in what they called the economy, which was in a German town. We just called it living in the economy, which meant living off base somewhere. But we were about 45 minutes right on the Moselle River in the middle of rural Germany. Nobody who looked like me, nobody who spoke English. And we lived upstairs of this winemaker, this old German family, Joseph Reese. He lived downstairs. and we lived in the upstairs condo, which he owned. And we lived in the middle of the vineyards. So they, to take money off of rent, they offered our family, to do a little work because the military didn't pay a lot. My dad wasn't an officer. He was enlisted. So, I would be out there doing the labor, get the little pouch on, pulling, getting trained at 11 years old how to pull the grapes off. Had to learn German if I wanted to make friends. And so that's what I did. I was bored. I was on the weekends. I didn't have anything to do. I was just sitting around in this very rural place in Germany, and there's a few little kids outside. So eventually I learned from being around them, I learned how to speak German. I made friends, and I became fluent in German. And then my mom would use me as a translator. She needed to go to the store. I just translate everything and all that. But, I tell people, like, we didn't come up financially rich, but we came up culturally rich. So my privilege my privilege is not financial or economic. My privilege is very cultural.
Interesting.
You see what I'm saying? So everybody has some privilege somewhere. Everybody does. If they can really think about it, there's something in your life that gave you an advantage. You may not be tapping into it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you can reach into all your experiences and everything you have. And there's some advantage you have somewhere. And that was my cultural privilege, was that. But I didn't recognize it as that at the time, and then we got based in, like I said, in the States. And so I was starting over again with culture shock and being an outsider because, here I come from England, being raised around British people and American people on the base in England. Most of the people who were based in England were from the East Coast. So my education in American culture was very New York. Mm-hmm. And so even now people think, oh, you're from New York. And I'm like, no, I'm not from New York. But they're like, nah, your mannerisms, the way you talk, the whole way you come across is very New York. But I'm not from New York. It's just, that's how I came up. But once I got to the Midwest, it's culture shock again, because here I was about 50 miles outside of Kansas City in another rural area. And it was rural American culture. And so I didn't fit in again, and that was with everybody, at first. Because even the black kids, I'm like, yo, I'm talking to them about what I'm into, and they're like, what are you talking about? Because they had their own artists they listened to. I'd never heard of these artists. They had their own slang that was very Midwestern. I'd never heard any of this slang. I talked funny to them. So, it was a process of, trying to find my way to fit in again. It was, how kids can be. So it was bumpy. I had to get in a few scraps, had to become best friends with the people I got in scraps with after a while. I mean, it was a process.
It sounded like you went from being comfortable as an outsider to being comfortable as a relatabler. I know that's not a word, but like you developed this attitude and this comfort with being able to just relate to people off the bat. And I'm sure that's impacted your life in various ways.
It definitely has, and it's probably become the centerpiece of my career, which is translating different groups. Being able to hear not only what people are trying to say, but how they feel, what they want you to feel. This is what they feel, and this is not only what they said. This is where they're coming from, and you might miss that, And so when I look at my career now, I see, those very uncomfortable positions I was put into as a child as a huge advantage, because, now I'm in a position where I do find myself, I translate. Okay, I'm doing this deal between, a rapper from the streets, still from the streets, that mentality, to an executive in Silicon Valley, or, a music executive who's hardcore to a tech bro who is, went to Stanford, and how do you bridge those two worlds so that deals can get done and so that people can benefit from each other and actually learn from each other, not only transact, but build relationships that are unconventional relationships. And I've seen so many of these really beautiful relationships that seem unconventional, but once you get people to kind of understand where each other is coming from, really beautiful things can really happen, when that translation can really happen. And that, to me, is what diversity is. It's translation of culture between many different sides. And that's not just how somebody looks. That's translating their experiences. It's translating the way that they were raised and what informs their psychology. You see what I'm saying? Translates their values. They said this because they have a value system that is like this, and your value system is like this. And reaching that common ground based upon what the two people are trying to achieve, or what they're trying to understand, what they're trying to know. Many times we're looking for these really quick shorthands of like, I know who that person is just by looking at them or just hearing a couple of words. And it just takes more work than that sometimes to really understand where people are coming from. And in a world where information's moving just that fast, we're online, we're making snap judgments. We don't have time for that. A lot of things, a lot of value, a lot of learning, a lot of really cool interactions get missed or never happen because of that. And so I think that's where there's a huge opportunity, and it's only becoming an even bigger opportunity with the way the world is now.
That's fascinating. You said that sometimes people in positions of power aren't discriminating against talent insidiously, but they don't have the life, social, or world experience to be able to see and value people for who they are. So do you think the solution is having a bias towards people who do have that insight into talent of all kinds, or what do you think?
You might have to rephrase the question. I'm not sure I totally.
In helping translate insight to corporate executives like you have before, or in supporting leaders of the future, how do we help people see talent where it hasn't been seen before?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that all the systems we have in place exist for a reason, but they have limitations. And there might have been a good reason for a system to exist during a certain period of time, but now we're in new times, and that system might have been totally relevant for this time and completely irrelevant for this new time. And I think as culture shifts, as people shift, as the world changes, economies shift. We go through a global economy. There's geopolitical shifts. There's cultural shifts. All of these things are happening in real time. The world that the systems are built for is not the same world 10 years later. And that's the same thing for all the social rules that we make. Many of the social rules that existed 20 years ago are completely outdated for today. The social rules that we have right now are going to be outdated in 5 years. And so when we make, kind of these dogmatic ideologies and we build them on top of the systems, it makes it really hard to change and tune the systems for what's happening now. Sure. So many of the rules that we've already made are already outdated, and so the systems are rigid because we've built systems change rules that won't allow us without all this consensus. Right, there has to be consensus for the systems changes. If you want to look at that in kind of a computer science kind of a way of looking at it, but it's very true. Because we are unified systems. That's what networks are. Human beings are. We all, our psychology is the software. Our body is the hardware. We connect with each other. That's the networks. All of those things are true. And the operating system is society and culture, right? And so to upgrade or change the operating system, right, where all the apps and the network we're connected to is the world, to change the operating system, right, there has to be all this consensus. But when we make all these rigid rule changes, like it's really, really hard to build in the plasticity and flexibility needed to build new systems. And so ultimately what you need is people who are fearless to be in the middle of culture, saying things that right now are unacceptable because what they're talking about is the new thing. Right. What they're talking about is the new systems that need to be built. And ultimately those people are kind of sacrifice themselves for the new thing to happen. And so the world is ultimately resistant to that because we get codified around what change happened in the past and why we needed the systems that exist. Ultimately, the rules we make, there's good reasons for those rules to exist, but then the world changes again. And so you need people with a systems approach to understand that people are changing and the world's changing. Instead of creating dogmatic ideologies and frameworks, what I need to do is create the environment for new ideas and the infrastructure that supports the individuality of human beings. And so if you create an environment like that, you're going to take an approach to human beings on an individual basis, understanding that there are certain experiences that you have that are uniquely yours, that there's no way we can get the ideas that we need to pop off unless we have you. Because you're uniquely informed, uniquely talented, and uniquely gifted. And all of those factors combined inside of you, specifically you, are what we need in order to move this particular idea forward. And I think with that kind of approach, it's harder to do that because, like I said, human beings need consensus because we want rules to govern everybody to help us all move cohesively together very quickly. But in that, we lose a lot of individuality and we lose a lot of what makes human beings individually special as well. And so it's a balance. It's a real balance. And there's no easy answer to this. And everybody wants to create all these easy answers. And one thing that I have noticed happening is you have, both sides coming up with kind of mimetic warfare, which reduces human beings into memes. And then you just have people just throwing memes back and forth at each other as they move more solidified into their own ideologies. And so that in and of itself is kind of antithesis to the uniqueness of human beings. When I think of the world, I think of it from a spiritual standpoint. I sit and I sit with this and I think there's millions of people that came before me. There's going to be millions of people that come after me, hopefully, right? And I'm only one person in one time and one moment. I'm here specifically at this time for a reason. What is it? And to be in the moment of where I'm at and to create authentically out of the energy that is uniquely mine and protect that. And I think that's what people are yearning for. They feel the individuality they have. They want to be members of a cohesive and functioning and healthy society, while at the same time expressing their individuality and being given the room to do that. And so I think it's not an easy thing to solve, but I also think that we need leaders who understand that, there's not going to be a shortcut to this. Right now, I think we have a lot of different leaders in a lot of industries that just see the warfare and they see it as a way to use it as an insertion point for leverage to power instead of leverage to freedom of the people, freedom of expression for the people. It's a leverage to power for people. And so you see a lot of power capture going on, which is very, very destructive socially.
Wow. That's why I often say the modern education system, current education system in society tends to sandpaper people down. So at Andreessen Horowitz, you ran the Talent Opportunity Initiative, where you looked for cultural geniuses. So I'm very curious, what did you do to try and find these cultural geniuses?
So the theory is that there are people that don't fit into the system, the conveyor belt system that we've built to identify and then operationalize talent into the economy. And so because there's all this talent that sits outside of that, we're effectively, as an economy at large, we're missing on a lot of productivity. We're missing out on a lot of new art. Like I said, economic productivity, and we're just missing out on the next. Let's just use Virgil as an example. Rest in peace to Virgil Abloh. Incredible impact on art, design, fashion, etc. Doesn't come from the central casting kind of main character factory that America has set up.
That's a white way to put
it. Especially Silicon Valley. Where Silicon Valley has built a very an archetypal identification process around software multiples specifically. And now as we look at it, we know now that, especially for consumer companies, it's not just building a great product, it's does anybody give a fuck? How do you know people care about the new thing? And this is where what I just said previously is that, which is the people building the innovation thing, the new things, are the people that intuitively understand the way that the structure, the way that the systems and the way the world is structured today ultimately needs to be broken, but it needs to be broken with value. So I need to engage in creative destruction, which is I need to disrupt what's going on in the current system by creating this new thing, which is going to create this entirely new behavior. And it's entirely new behavior amongst human beings and consumers is going to create all this massive value, which shareholders are going to benefit from. But in order for that to happen, I have to have the people that are creating the new shorthand, the new cultural shorthand, because that's what needs to get translated into the code that becomes a new product that everybody wants to adopt. And so I think thinking kind of 5 steps ahead of everybody else, it's like, okay, if you match the cultural geniuses with the technical geniuses, you essentially have the perfect situation when you're building new value. But we just don't have a system to identify cultural geniuses. More than likely, they didn't work at Google or Facebook, Airbnb or Uber. More than likely, they don't know what venture capital even is. More than likely, you're going to find them in completely different places on the internet. Find them on Reddit. Find them building their own, their own sites, their own ways. Find them on different college campuses, maybe on HBCU campuses. Maybe you're going to find them in different cliques. Maybe they're going to be an up-and-coming young kid who's designing stuff for Drake inside of the OVO clique. And this kid's, a genius. Same way kind of like Virgil came up. But finding where the kind of, where's the heat map for what's bubbling up? What are the signs that tell me this particular institution, this crew, this geographic area, these social hangouts, these subreddits, are the places to look. And then when you do find them there, these are the signs that genius is happening. Like they're creating a new language. They're creating a new way to communicate. I met a genius recently. His name is David Sebastian. He signed to Warner Records. I think he's that. I think he's exactly that. He's found an entirely new way to communicate concepts, and his artistic expression is exploding in music, fashion, civic service, in everything, in what he's doing. And I think he's incredible, and he's kind of what I'm talking about. So looking for more of those types of people, and then putting money into what they do as a long tail investment, not only into their ventures today, but into who they are in the long term, building a relationship and helping them. Many times creatives don't have the operational expertise to take their creative explosion and put operational discipline behind it to take it to a mass market audience. And so sometimes what you want to do is pair them with those operators that can take this gigantic explosion of creative energy, of source energy that's coming out in the world from them, and actually turn it into a product vision, right, that can scale operationally. So that's been the mission. That was the mission of TXO, is to do that. Shout out to my homie Kofi Ampadu, who is now, who I handed off the baton to when I left to go do Royal. Very, very capable young man, and love what he's doing with TXO. But that's the thesis, and it's a more broad thesis than TXO. But TXO is an experiment meant to kind of prove that this is real. This is a real theory.
Could you describe more of what ideal environment you envision that would facilitate the communion and camaraderie of technical and cultural geniuses?
Could you ask that another way?
Yeah. Whether it's like a co-working space or an event or an incubator or something, what kinds of environments make it easier for technical and cultural geniuses to connect and collaborate?
Just relaxed environments for everybody to sit around and just like be able to just completely just like lose their minds and go crazy over ideas, right? Just to be able to like connect with each other, share ideas, like a party.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Which is why I love parties, because I can bring people together, and it's just like, if the vibes, if the vibrational frequencies are right, you can bring people together, and they just like, you can just have these crazy conversations, right? Because everybody's kind of in an elevated space. the vibes are good, and you can kind of get people to translate to each other. But like environments like that, I think social environments where people can sit down and like breaking bread together. That's why I like doing dinners too. But environments that are relaxed and where it's like I'm not trying to be this thing. I'm just trying to like learn from you. You can learn from me. The vibes are high. It's social. It's chill. I love environments like that because people intuitively, well, they say water finds its own level. People will intuitively gravitate towards what's kind of exciting them. And I've seen that happen over and over again. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer. You tweeted, it's June 2013, 3 a.m. I'm in Zuckerberg's backyard singing Smashing Pumpkins songs. Drew Houston is playing the guitar. Kanye singing along. And you have IKEA furniture and you never met any of them.
Yeah, so I'm in Mountain View. I got a little apartment. I'm startup struggle. I got 2 kids living in an apartment. Got my startup going. I'm a founder. This is 12 years ago. I sold everything I owned. I liquidated my credit cards. To fund my startup. I was the original investor in my startup, and I just wanted to do it. So I was all in. And so I kind of busted myself down to nothing financially to do it. And so here I am in this apartment. I'm making IKEA furniture. I get a call from Ben one night, which Ben, shout out to the homie. That's family to me. That's one of my brothers. That's one of my best friends, Ben Horowitz. Shout out. I get a call, and he's like, yo, I'm with Yeezus. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? He's like, yo, I'm with Yeezus right now. You got to come through. So I'm like, yo, I dropped everything. I peel over to the house, and the first thing I hear is Black Skinhead playing over the stereo. I can hear it from the outside. I'm just like, what is happening? So I go in there, and Ye is on the couch, and he's like going crazy. Ben sitting there. And I'm like, yo, what? I never met Ye before. I'm like, yo, what up, Ye? And Ye's like, yo, what up? So I sit down next to Ye, and we did a little album listening party, and doing all the lyrics to Yeezus. Looking at Ye next to me, just doing the lyrics, and I'm like, what is going on? So as the night continues on, a few people come, and they're like, yo, let's go over to Zuckerberg's house, because Zuckerberg, he needs to meet Ye. And Ben's like, you want to ride with me? And I'm like, yeah, for sure I want to ride with you. So we went over to Zuck's house, and, it's his house in Palo Alto, and we're chilling in the backyard. And like I said, Drew Houston was there, and, and Zuck's like, can I get you some water? And I'm like, yes, Mark, you can. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's crazy.
And he had the the dog that looks like a mop jumps up on me and got the glass of water, and we're just sitting around talking, and Drew starts playing Mark's guitar, and then I started singing, despite all my rage, I'm still, and we just vibing out on some stuff, and singing Smashing Pumpkins songs. It was 2 a.m. and I'm sitting here, and I'm like, okay, I'm in Mark Zuckerberg's backyard in Palo Alto with Ye and Drew Houston and Drew Houston. It was a crazy night. It was one of those things that can only happen during that era. It was a very, very magical era of Silicon Valley. So that was my crazy night with Zuck and Ye.
That is unbelievable. That is so interesting. Wow. Speaking of Ben Horowitz, and shout out to Ben Horowitz, my favorite VC, the moment I found out a VC could be friends with Kanye and Nas and all these people that I felt like I was friends with in similar ways, I was like, whoa, you can merge the worlds.
I had met Ben at a founder dinner when I first got to Silicon Valley, and I was roommating in a hacker house with like Chris Lyons and like James Norman and a few other people in the Sunset. So we went to this dinner one night, and it was with Ben, and he was breaking down how Lil Weezy lyrics relate to business. And I'm just like, yo, that's crazy. No one ever has taken rap. At that point in time, no one had ever really taken rap lyrics and translated them onto like how you manage your board of directors and like, how you solve employee disputes and like, how, fundraising or like product problems and like translated lyrics into like how to solve that stuff. And I was just like, that was super fascinating. Obviously,
That's specific?
Yeah. At the time he was writing a blog all the time called Ben's Blog, which I don't even know if it's up anymore. Iconic blog posts from like 2013 to 2017. Some of the most iconic blog posts ever written. The most iconic of which is called The Struggle. I don't even know that one exists, but it talks about the founder struggle. And after the dinner, everybody's, they're rushing Ben. But Ben's wife, Felicia, was there at the dinner. And so I got a chance to really just kick it with Felicia. And we're just, chopping it up. Felicia's from Compton, California. And so we're just talking about Compton and family and all this other stuff. And I told her about the business. And then, she introduced me to Ben. And we just clicked. And like, Ben is like one of the realest human beings. And just having a chance to see how Ben operates behind the scenes, just the authenticity and just the realness of that person, and Felicia also, the way that they both individually operate and collectively operate behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know. They don't do a lot of things that they don't do for fanfare. It's just real human beings, and I've had the pleasure to be mentored by Ben for the last 10 years, 11 years, and be a friend and befriend and be a brother to Ben and vice versa. And it's a real brotherhood, man. And respect to my brother there because he's a real one. So, yeah, I ran that company for 4 years. We scaled it to 12 cities. It didn't work, scaled it too fast. The unit economics of the business completely went upside down. And, I was bankrupt. I poured all my money into the company. It was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So, I was getting recruited by a few different companies, in the Valley to come join their teams. And I get this incredible call from Ben one day, and he's like, yeah, forget that. Don't work for them. Come work for us. We're going to make history. We're going to do some great things together. And my experience at A16z was just incredible. It's going to go down easily as the highlight of my entire career. Just the things that happened while I was there for 7 years. I will never forget the people, the things that we did, the things that we accomplished, the incredible things that we all accomplished together. And just shout out to Ben, Mark, Scott Cooper, Jeff Jordan, Frank Chen, everybody over there that we built together. We did some amazing things, and even my team, Redeema, Ahuja, they're just all kinds of people that I will never forget the times and the moments and the things that we built together, and kind of just the mentorship from Ben during that process. It was just an incredible time in my career.
Wow. That's awesome. Hearing that directly from you. I mean, Andreessen Horowitz has provided probably the best entrepreneurial / startup content that helped me kind of assimilate certain ideas into my head when I was a teenager. You talked about, you and Ben echo this idea of the story of the entrepreneur and hip hop being so similar, coming from nothing to becoming great. And do you want to talk more about the similarities between hip hop and being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, hip hop is a revolutionary language, and it's not the connection between revolutionary movements and capitalism is not exactly a smooth transition, obviously. Okay, but between startups have to do something very similar. With a very small group of people, they have to usurp the existing systems by starting a revolution because somebody somewhere isn't being served correctly, or the new thing that needs to exist. And so starting something from nothing is an incredible amount of self-belief. You think about Biggie wearing a Coogee sweater in the Juicy video, talking about, when I was dead broke, man, I couldn't picture this 50-inch screen leather sofa. Like,
Right.
car notes about 4 G's flat. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, he was still in Bed-Stuy when he did that. He was still on the block when he shot that video. So there's this kind of this reality distortion field that human beings intuitively that have this thing inside of them, they're able to imagine themselves and imagine the new thing as if it's already there. To them, this distortion field, the reality distortion field, is their force field to be able to go and build the new thing. But you have to be incredibly courageous and smart, and you have to be convincing. You know, the reason why Biggie blew up is because you felt him. Whatever you was feeling about your life, what you wanted to do, what you wanted to achieve, when you listen to that music, it made you feel it too. It made you feel, I can do this too. Right? And that's a startup founder. When they're talking to new employees and talking to investors, they're singing Juicy to them. Right? That's the energy of that song, is the same energy a startup founder brings in front of investors, new employees, customers. They're basically rapping Juicy, right? And for me, that seemed obvious from an energetic standpoint of where rap being such an aspirational, artistic expression, that you can relay the same energy of ambition, the same energy of aspiration, of going from absolutely nothing to something. Whereas all of these reasons exist why you should be counted out, why you should never come back, you should never succeed. And yet, here you are talking as if those reasons don't even matter. I've already succeeded. Not only that, I'm the best. I'm the best in the world. And just because you don't see it yet, it does not mean that I'm not the best in the world. It means it hasn't materialized yet, but I'm going to materialize it. I'm going to manifest it. And that's what I'm telling you. This is my manifesto. I'm going to manifest all of these things. And that, to me, is kind of the spiritual feeling that founders have to have. And they convey that to their teams. They evangelize that to their teams, investors, customers, etc. And if you have that, the special few who have that, you don't count them out. You don't bet against them. You bet on them. You know, and I had that energy. When I walked into Andreessen Horowitz for the first time to pitch my company, I did not have a product yet. I was building it. I didn't have customers yet. I had partners that were big partners that had agreed to come on board. Press loved the idea. I was able to gin up some press. So I was in Fast Company. I was in Wall Street Journal. I was in all these places without even having the product launch yet. That's how strong the concept was. Fast Company and Forbes and Wall Street Journal are writing on this thing like this is it, what this guy's building. And it hadn't even launched yet. All I had was a launch page, but the launch page was getting hit so hard. People wanted that thing to be, they wanted that thing to exist. And then I had some engineers in the company who were moonlighting who worked in the day at Andreessen Horowitz portfolio companies. So it's having them on my deck as my engineering team, having 6 people who are like very senior inside of portfolio companies on my pitch deck as being in the company and building code for the company at night, told them that this kid from the Midwest, he's able to get press, he's able to get engineers who have really good jobs to work on this at night for equity only. And he's walking in the door with this, like, doesn't care mentality, like this is going to be the future. And that's kind of how you have to get started. But then you have to prove it. You got to execute once you get started. And once people start believing in you, now people are trusting you with their livelihoods. And that's the hard side of it, because when the company failed, which it did, all of that comes crashing back down on you, right? And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, that's going to happen to you a few times. And if you're not strong, you stop believing, because you're like, I believed in this stuff once. I believed in myself. I did all this, and then it fell down on me, because it hurts. It hurts to say to somebody, you believed in me and now I got to lay you off. It hurts to say to investors, your money's not coming back. You believed in me, and I made this stupid decision. And so going through that, I think ultimately allowed me to come into Andreessen Horowitz and sit with some of the seed and A-stage founders, understanding the psychology of building a company, and those hours and that stress and raising another round. And it might be a down round. And I lost this key employee, and now other employees are looking to leave because they love that employee, and just the things that you can go through that really fuck with your psychology when you're trying to do that. I think my experience in life before becoming a founder and then capped by being a founder and going through that ultimately helped me to be valuable to many of the founders that I was able to spend time with while working at Andreessen Horowitz, and many of which I met during their seed round, a few of which now run public companies. And I'm so proud of them. And I've maintained those relationships. But, being able to meet them before they were the belle of the ball, before they were hot shit, you know what I'm saying? And knowing what it was, and knowing, it's the psychology of building a company. It's the emotional discipline of building a company. It's what if there is no tomorrow? I told everybody we're going to win, and now I'm staring in the abyss. I've got the 1,000-yard stare to nowhere right now because of what's going on in front of me. Being able to make people understand that. And then seeing people be triumphant despite failure. Seeing people lose everything, go bankrupt, company goes under, and then they come right back 6 months later with the new company and we're going again. And seeing that, and then seeing them succeed ultimately. That to me is so rewarding. Just to see the unflappable nature of the human spirit. If you believe you've lost, if you believe you're a victim, and you believe you can't make it, you've lost, right? Because the truth is, bad stuff's going to happen to you. The truth is, it's going to be really hard. The truth is, you're going to get hit with things that are not fair. That's just what's going to happen. That's just life. It's not what's going to happen to you. It's how you respond to that. It's ultimately how you respond. Can you stay the course? And, and that's where I come from, and my whole life has been that, because I've walked through some tremendous shit in my life that I would never change. And I've had people ask me that. They're like, if you could go back in time, would you change that? No, I wouldn't change a thing. Not a thing.
Wow. You just spit straight facts only. There's no waste of words. Okay, so a lot of people watching this are from Chicago, and you've said that Chicago is a ridiculously under-tapped ecosystem. Its moment is fast approaching. So could you tell us more about why you think that?
Yeah, so when people zig, you gotta zag. When people are being fearful, that's when it's time to be greedy. When people are being greedy, that's when it's time to be fearful. Chicago's a world-class city. It always has been. It has the infrastructure. So you look at the ingredients for the recipe. If you want to bake a cake, you got to have all the things. You got to have the eggs, the flour, the sugar. You got to have the shortening, all that. You got to have it all there, right? All the ingredients are there. What's happened in Chicago over the last 20 years has caused people to think that Chicago's always going to be down, and I just think that's ridiculous. You look at the talent that's come out of Chicago to be successful in other places. There is zero reason why, with the financial infrastructure that actually does exist in Chicago, it isn't yet being deployed. There's alpha there, in my opinion. It's a big city. There's a lot of room for improvement. Whoever steps up to take leadership roles in the city, both politically and in economic ventures, financial ventures in the city, I think is going to benefit greatly in the next 10 to 20 years. As soon as a city is at its lowest point, that is a world-class city, or is at a low point, or at least the media wants to say that it's at its lowest point. And I'm not saying any metro area is perfect. You can go look at all of these metro areas that people applaud and laud, even San Francisco, and you can see that these areas have their issues. But Chicago is an incredible city with incredible culture. Incredible food, incredible culture around the food, incredible ties into hip-hop story, incredible ties into fashion. So from a consumer standpoint, in my opinion, I think Chicago is alpha, and that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people who want to build there. It is going to take some work. It's going to take the political leadership of the city, the economic leadership of the city coming together and creating an environment where people can cook. Allow people to stay in Chicago and cook. That's it. And I think we're approaching a time where that's going to happen. There's a lot of new funds being launched. I got friends launching new funds, existing funds that have raised, even in this environment, have raised new funds, and I think it's a cool city, and I'm starting to see just new kind of hot spots all over the city of like creativity starting to bubble up. It's early. It's very early, but I'm bullish on that town, 100%. I'm bullish on that town.
Me too. I'd like to thank many of my friends, the people I know are part of those. So to wrap this up, from my own intuition, I quickly got the sense that you approach your family, your wife, and your kids in a very kind of conscious way filled with awareness. You've said you feel bad for other men who've avoided fatherhood for career, etc., because you believe those things offer way less meaning. So would you mind telling us about your perspective on fatherhood?
And so let me make sure that I caveat and frame this correctly. I by no means feel that every single person has to be a parent of children. They don't, necessarily have to do it. I do think it's ultimately proven that if you're dedicated to being a father, that the outcome is a sharpening of the spirit and a sharpening of the mind in that process. Ultimately, no matter how much I've taught my children, they've taught me at least 2 times more than I've taught them. And if you're present with your children and you're in their lives, that should be the process. Because once an adult, twice a child. I'll be a child again if I live long enough, right? I'll go right back to being a child again. That's what elderly people are, right? So once a man, twice a child. That process of life, what I've learned passing on to my children, how they see the world clearly, without any bias in many cases, except for mine that I put on them, and I try not to. I try to be cognizant of the fact that this is just Daddy's experiences I'm projecting on you, but I don't want you to look at it through my eyes. Them giving you a fresh view of life, even as a 5-6-year-old, my son, the things he says sometimes are profound because they're tapped in. And so when you're present with them, it's what keeps you young. I mean, I'm 48 years old. They've kept me incredibly young, Just tapping in with that in those moments helps you to be really present in the meaning of what this very brief moment is that we call life. And it's a very, very brief moment. It's a lot faster than we think, and it's over. It's gone. You're done. And being present in each moment with them has grounded me into a sense of meaning for what I do every single day. Now, can you find a sense of purpose and meaning without having children? Obviously you can. There's many different ways to get to that. But I see a lot, or I've mentored, and I do mentor a lot of younger men, and some of them have children, and some of them are very present, and some of them are not. And, without judgment, I try to have real conversations with the ones who are not. Not to tell them that they should do this or they should do that. I don't want to come from a place of being above them, but more from a place of, man, I want you to have this too. I don't want you to miss this. There's something that is beautiful, and I want you to have it. And you have it, but you don't have it. You're not grasping it. You're not holding it. And I believe fatherhood is transformational for men. I believe family is transformational for men. We've moved to a culture where it's all about chasing the bag at all costs. And I just believe personally, my own values is some costs are too high. There's a lot of things I could have done by now that I could have actually moved my career even further ahead than where it's at. And I've had a great career. I'm not by any means mad about where my career is. But I didn't do those things because I felt like I learned a lesson while I was running my company, the first 2 years of running my company, when I was away from my children for those years, that I would never do that again. Because I realized what I missed, I can't ever get back. No matter what, I can't get that back. Those moments, those things that I got from that, I can't ever get them back. And that should apply to all your loved ones, whether you have children or not. And that includes your friends and family who you love, who you consider loved ones. Don't take for granted that they're going to be there tomorrow. Make sure that you set aside intentional space, not only just to be around them, but to be real, open, and vulnerable around them. Create enough space and intentionality to know that these moments are all that we own. You know, we got all these clothes and cars and all this other stuff. We don't own that. The only thing we own is this moment right now. Like me here with you, that's why I'm present right here with you, because this is a part of my life right now that I'm spending with you right now on this podcast. So I'm very present in this moment. That's because there'll never be another moment like this again. You know what I'm saying? The person I am today on this podcast, I'm going to be a different person tomorrow. I'm going to be a completely different person the next week and the next year from now. So I'm only going to be this person now, having this moment with you as this person that you are right now. And I don't take that for granted. So when you think about your children, that's your legacy. It's just amplified. All of that is just amplified. And so I do talk to people about that. I do talk to them about, our generation is kind of the Peter Pan generation. We want to party as long as possible. We want to live that swipe life as long as possible. Be on them date naps, be in the streets, all that. 35, 36, 37 years old, 40 years old, still at the parties in Miami and LA and all over the place and doing all that. It's all good, but slow down, have your fun, but slow down and make sure to anchor your life as well. Whether that's children, which I believe for me it's children, and it's the very obvious answer, but whether it's children or not, make sure to balance your life and anchor your life in something that ultimately gives you meaning for what you do and why you wake up in the morning. That's all. That's really my message to men.
Thanks for watching and listening. Reach out to Nait Jones via his social media. Links are in the description. Mats are included as well.